would you introduce yourself to our listeners who are used to all sorts of people?
I would say that I'm trying to at least become a modern day alchemist. And so essentially what that means to me is somebody who kind of blends more occult practices and philosophies and kind of bridges it with more modern, tangible um, healing modalities. And in particular, I really love psychology, but I always feel like there's something missing. I feel like there's a big why that has been missing in the mental health space. And my own journeys with mental health and working on myself has kind of made me realize that it kind of all starts with habits, but then you also have to have, so meaning having certain habits that you don't want to change or certain things that you're doing that are reinforcing the negative mindsets or the mental suffering that's happening. I think that's most people's problems from what I've seen, and it's definitely my problem.
Wait,
Um,
let's back up for a second. I'm sorry. Do you mind telling us a little bit of your story about how you got involved in the mental health world? Because before you were a musical artist, right?
yeah, so I was in okay, well, so I was at university and hated it. It was cold winters in Pittsburgh, which just isn't really my speed, and had depression, anxiety, panic attacks, was just not treating myself right. I mean, it was the first time I wasn't really exercising or being active or really being outside just because I didn't have to. I had no supervision. So I was just eating Chick-fil-A every day and hanging out inside and going out
Mm,
partying and drinking and smoking weed. And I definitely just led to a slow decline. And then obviously during the winter months, it's the most
ugh.
devastating. Yeah, especially with the
Yeah.
vitamin. I didn't know about vitamin D back then, so I just didn't understand what was
So you
happening.
had seasonal affective disorder on top of depression.
For sure. Yeah. And so
Yeah.
I talked to a therapist and it helped for a little bit. I didn't go very long. Part of my arrogance, I think, at that time specifically, and hard-headedness. Being open with people was difficult and wasn't really comfortable with that. So I liked music. I was like, the only thing I really liked that made me happy, that didn't make me sad, was music. And so moved to Los Angeles and was doing music. But while I was out there in Los Angeles, I was reforming my habits because in my mind, especially as a singer, I was a singer-songwriter, still am for fun. And the body is the instrument when you're a singer. So in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, let me optimize my body. Let me work out, eat right, meditate, do all the breath work, right? These things that are healthy for my mind and body because it's almost like making sure that you're taking care of your instrument. You want the guitar, the piano to be tuned and properly refurbished or whatever it is taken care of. And I was reading philosophy books too. And it was just weird. It was like I left school. I'm like, I don't like learning. I'm tired of school. I've been doing it my whole life. So then like reading, Carl Jung, falling all the way down the rabbit hole of Carl Jung. Nietzsche was interesting for a little bit, but he's a little intense. And then just reading a lot of books on spirituality and philosophy, um, and kind of falling down that rabbit hole. And I found myself doing more of that work than music. I was spending a lot more time getting up and working out and focusing on, Wim Hof breath work and, fasting and all these things, cold showers, as opposed to actually creating music. And so then COVID hits and the music industry shuts down and I'm a server, in Los Angeles. So obviously that shuts down, kind of forces me to reevaluate a lot of things. And so I spent that summer literally just going hiking every day and just meditating and thinking um, and decided I want to go back to school to become a therapist and get into the mental health space. But there also is another edge to it with, I mean, do we talk about plant medicines? Is that cool? Can I?
We can talk about anything. I mean,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So the big thing too, I mean, I've been kind of tiptoeing around is plant medicines. And so when I was out in Los Angeles, got into psilocybin mushrooms and I mean, completely opened my eyes to
So you may be surprised to know this is not the first time this topic has come up on
Yeah.
good,
Pandas playing cello. No, we
good.
had in our archives we have a whole episode.
Oh, really?
Someone who went to Amsterdam
Mm,
Yes.
for therapy, yes, for a whole therapy program.
yeah.
A
Psychedelic
group
therapy.
experience. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very formal compared to what I did, which was going out
Okay.
into going out into Runyon Canyon and doing it in the sun. But it opened my eyes to one major thing was how, as an adult, I'd lost a lot of the joy that I had as a kid, and how many adults lose that joy.
Mhm.
And I remember I had remembered during that time period of when I was a kid, I used to look at adults and see how rigid and overly structured and limited the existence was. And I obviously I wasn't thinking that fully. I was just like, oh, the way that my child mind perceived it was, oh, adults are so goofy. Like, oh, adults are so goofy. Like, why are they so weird? Like, oh, when I'm an adult, I don't want to be like that. And then I
Yes, I
remember,
used to tell myself like little notes like, Julia, remember when you're an adult, try to be fun.
yes, yeah,
Don't
don't
lose
lose that fear.
playfulness.
Yeah, and I mean, I totally was taking myself way too seriously, totally lost in the sauce, lost in my own head. And when I did it, when I did, psilocybin, I was like, oh my God, like this is amazing. Like I remember what it felt like to be a kid again. I remembered the promises I'd made to myself as a kid to not turn out the ways that I did. And it just opened my eyes to a whole other reality of okay, things can be different. It doesn't have to be this way. The way that I'm perceiving the world, the way that I'm moving through life, it doesn't have to be this way. It is, and it can be, but it also doesn't have to be. And that was really eye-opening. It was kind of at its core and fundamentally, I just think that it just provided me a choice that I
Mm.
didn't think I had.
And so the choice was between,
Having fun and enjoying life
and
or allowing the external circumstances to dictate my mental health and to just think that life is not fun. It's not magical. There's not magic to be had here.
Mhm.
That was the major thing growing up is that you have, especially me, I've always had high expectations with music, right? I mean, you don't become a musician unless you have high expectations, right? It's not like it's kind of either you make it or you don't, it's not becoming like a lawyer where it's like, I can make six figures and be okay. It's like, oh, I got to be famous and big. So life was full of a lot of high expectations and then sometimes experiencing it and being, oh, this is not nearly as magical as I thought in my head.
Mhm.
Or not achieving that thing and then being like, oh, okay, well, that just doesn't happen to a person like me or whatever the scenario is.
Mhm.
And kind of more seeing magic in everyday life, but then also seeing how I've been placing limitations on my own ability to perceive that magic.
Yeah. Can you help everyone get better at that, please? Maybe.
I mean, I'm I mean, I was guiding people. We were doing it at Malibu and Joshua Trees like was the main spot, and it really is just kind of it's really simple. I think one problem that
I don't
my
even necessarily mean through like psilocybin. I
mm,
mean like just generally like when you get your full-fledged therapy degree, whatever it is. What are you looking for an MSW? Is that what you're going for?
yeah,
Yeah, your master's in social work. Okay, so when you get that, can you maybe you can like specialize in helping people come back to their aliveness?
sounds fun. Yeah, I could very much do that for sure.
I really
Yeah.
want you to.
No, remaining playful as an adult is something I talk about a lot, and it is very important to me. This is not the first time I've shared the anecdote that when I worked in an office, someone came into my office and said, "Carmen, your office looks like a pediatrician's waiting room,"
Yeah.
because I had all sorts of toys everywhere. And I was highly complimented by that. I mean, because that's what I was trying to achieve, I guess.
Yeah, we all have that inner child. I mean, it really kind of comes down to inner child work, right? And so that's really what it
You
is.
know,
That
and I think you know this, I'm sure better than I do, and Julia too, that playfulness or playing is how we learn,
Mm,
as toddlers and as all sorts of mammals learn by playing. And so I feel compelled to ask the question, when we stop playing, do we stop learning?
yes.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah, I because it is. I mean, that is what animals do when they're all animals, human beings included, is we play
Yeah.
to learn and to to integrate information in a more enjoyable way. So and that's something that was college and schools they kind of take away that I shouldn't say kind of they do take away that playfulness and they make it very structured and rigid. And that was, I mean, another revelation I guess I had was realizing that learning could be fun and that um, it doesn't have to be rigid. It doesn't have to be overly structured. We just make it that way for whatever reason. I don't know why. And that's,
Well,
yeah, I generally don't know why we make it
yeah,
so.
Let's talk about that.
there's probably sociological, anthropological reasons for that. You know, who came up with the idea of the school schedule? You know, I
Yeah.
don't know the curriculum. I have, this will seem like totally unrelated, but it'll come
Mhm.
back. I am very interested in all sorts of stuff, and I watch a lot of YouTube channels by biblical scholars, not evangelicals or anything, by scholars.
Mhm.
So there's this trove, thousands of, I think it's Sumerian tablets have been discovered that are, I don't know, 3, 4, 5,000 years old. And these are tablets that were used in schools in whatever place society spoke that language. And the tablets were divided in half. So on the left side of the tablet, the teacher would write the lesson out. And then on the right side of the tablet, the student's job was to copy the lesson. So the left side of the tablet was never erased or scraped, but the right side of the tablet was scraped all the time as each new student came along. And
Mhm.
so one of the things they've been able to do by studying these thousands of tablets and the way they're scraped is figure out what courses were taught first,
Hmm.
what courses were taught later.
Oh, they have a whole curriculum.
They've sort of been able to piece together the curriculum. So I love this little anecdote, which I probably didn't get exactly right for many reasons. One, it shows you all the stuff you can learn from little things.
Mhm.
And how early on, you know, relevant to our conversation, people began to think in terms of structure for learning.
Yeah.
Okay, I think this is really a fruitful thread of conversation because when I think about whenever someone puts rigidity and structure and takes the fun out of something, I think you've got to ask, what are they afraid of happening? They're trying to control something.
Of course.
What are they afraid of? And I think it's that, like, if you look at babies, even like forgetting all other mammals, human babies, let's just look at human babies. They're such learning machines. They learn that's what they're doing when they're awake. That's the entire thing. When they're eating, pooping, everything, it's about learning. They're such learning machines. I wonder if there's a fear, like, what will they learn? Like, if we let them just at their devices of learning, what are they going to learn? Maybe it's not what we want them to learn. Well, the truth is, they'll learn the stuff you don't want them to learn, and they'll learn the stuff that you do want them to learn, maybe. But they're for sure going to learn the stuff that you don't want them to learn because they notice, right? Far beyond what you think they notice, right? So maybe this rigidifying, and when we say it's time to grow up, like it's time to grow up and be structured and be serious and stuff, taking ourselves too seriously and
Mhm.
only using the knowledge that we have rather than getting new knowledge through play and discovery and failure, maybe that's about control.
Well, I think it's I mean everything we do I feel like is always going to be rooted in some form of reality, right? So the world can be an unforgiving place in certain scenarios, and so I think part of it definitely is this fear that if I go back to that vulnerable state, I'll get eaten alive. There is a fundamental thread of thought in the collective
Because
unconscious.
back then I was helpless. And so then if I go back, I'll still be helpless. Yeah.
Yeah, and also when we have this theory that pervades everyone knows, which is survival of the fittest, or the way that that's the way that the world works. Not even saying that that's exactly how the world works. I'm just saying that's our perception, very clear since Darwin, which is that it is survival of the fittest. So when you always have that running in the back of your mind that it's survival of the fittest, dog eat dog world, and it's reinforced constantly in our media all the time, the last thing you want to do is to become the vulnerable puppy when you're like there's
Right.
dogs out there. So
It's
it's
scary.
yeah, and everyone's posturing too. That's one thing that, psilocybin aside, one way that you can help people get loose or get more playful is you got to go first. So I think that's the reason why people love people like Jim Carrey. He had an amazing quote. I don't know the exact quote, but he mentioned how he realized that the reason why people loved him so much and why he got so much praise and millions of dollars is because he made it okay to be goofy and silly,
Mhm.
right? You know, you give people permission, and that's really what it fundamentally is you're by being goofy, by being silly first, you give other people permission to do the same. And not everyone's going to join you. It's not just because you act goofy that, you know, there's going to be tons of people that are like, look at that idiot or look how goofy they are. But I think it's another reason why we love artists and musicians is because they allow us to bounce off of them. They've put their heart on their sleeves, and then we can kind of be like, oh, okay, cool. Someone else feels the way I do. But someone has to go out there and do it first, right?
Hmm.
Many people. Doesn't have to, but that's how it is. So, yeah, I think that when you find people who are willing to be goofy and willing to be silly and playful, um, we got to do our best to support that in certain ways. So,
Yeah.
So
How
so
can
many,
we?
so many, been reflecting so many great thinkers or artists
yep.
have this common element in their biography. Now, this is anecdotal. I can't support it with statistics,
Mm,
but this common element is something like they didn't do well in school, but their parents had a large library, or their uncle or favorite aunt had a large library, and they read through it all, uh, and, you know, in great enthusiasm and random interest. I've been into Pushkin lately, one of my many random interests. And that's true of him. Considered the great Russian poet and who sort of invented Russian literature. And he was horrible at school, but his dad had a huge library. So
mm,
he devoured it.
yeah. Yeah, and for me, learning became also more, and I don't think everyone's like this. I think it depends on the person. I know for me, um, purpose is really important. So I was an econ major when I dropped out of university. So in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, and the first semester I did pretty good. I got A's and B's. So I was like working hard. And I did totally mediocre in high school. Let me actually take this seriously. But then I was thinking in my head, I'm like, God, I'm depressed right now. Also, I'm going to work hard to then graduate, to then get a job I don't want, to then keep working hard, to then buy a house and have but everyone does that. And lots of people are not happy. And I don't see a lot of people super happy with their regular jobs. So it was just kind of like the motivation was kind of drained. And then helping people. And for me personally, the psilocybin experience kind of opened my eyes of being of service and how fun it can be. I was like, okay, that's a purpose. And so then I went back to university and got straight A's because I had that purpose. And that's another thing that I think is really important for people in general, but more specifically is finding what makes you tick, what motivates you, what gets you up every day. Um, Knowing how you work is really important. So then you can understand how to motivate yourself because everyone's different, right? One person might be motivated to help other people, another one might be for money. I am pretty non-judgmental. I don't care what it is. I think people need to be honest with themselves too. I think some people think they're supposed to be motivated by something because it's the better thing to do. Like I can't be motivated by money or by validation. And it's like, look, at the end of the day, spiritually speaking, is it probably going to be fulfilling? No. But if that's what gets you to the next level, I'm not going to stop you. Like some people
Right.
need to get the money to realize they don't want it. Some people need to get the hot partner to realize that it's deeper than that, right? Who am I to step in your way and be like, well, no, at the end of the road, you're not gonna care about it. Well, it's like, yeah, but that's
You're
their
not there yet.
yeah, exactly. Just like you wouldn't tell a kid like, oh, you're only learning arithmetic. Well, it's actually algebra that matters. It's like, well,
Right. Like, oh,
let the kid add first. Like, you know, like dang, like so yeah, everyone's really different. I think people being honest with themselves are like, what really makes me interested in things and in life? And that's not a clear answer. Like that's not something anyone can tell. Like no one can tell you that. Parents try to tell you it. Adults, government very much tries to tell you it. And it's just I think it maybe might be laziness, difficulty, maybe a lack of self-awareness why we don't let people figure that out for themselves. I don't know. Probably going back to the fear.
I still think it's fear. I think
Yeah.
we have a cultural fear. Maybe it comes from the Puritans
Yeah. Oh,
that like what's inside us is just like probably bad and needs to be altered to be acceptable. And so nurturing sort of the native spark that's in someone feels dangerous because what if that native spark is, well, I get motivated by doing perverse sexual things, right? That's like the fear, like that someone gets motivated by that. But
Mhm.
really, when you work with people and you see psychologically where they're at, it's very rare that something that's so complex, like a perverse sexual thing,
Mhm.
is in fact the motivating thing. It's usually very simple, like love, connection, service, hope, safety. I mean, when
Mhm.
people are motivated by for money or material things, it's usually safety. Or just want to feel safe, and that's totally reasonable motivation. And so just when you look at the foundational essence of a motivation, I feel like I can't think of a case in which something is evil about it, unless a person's really just severely mentally ill.
Yeah, I would definitely say that there's always exceptions to the rule, right? You know, the way that universe manifests itself. But I think your point very much stands where we're actually probably causing a lot more inadvertently people to do things that are outside the realm of love and connection because they're not being, let's say, validated in the right ways, or they're not being reinforced for the good things. And so,
Right. We don't treat them like little plants that are growing in a garden and we're curious what they'll be. We treat them as if they're like on a farm and they all have to become stalks of wheat or something.
yeah, and because they know what wheat, they're like, well, we know how to grow wheat. We know what it tastes like. We know what we can make out of it. I don't know, like, what rutabaga is. I'm not about to try to start planting that. That's ridiculous. Like, people are not about to start adventuring because it's work. It's hard. And also, I mean, bless the Puritans' hearts, man. I mean, they were going through it. I mean, like, I'm glad I didn't grow up back then. Like, that's a tough
Well, yeah.
sell.
Truth be told, it predates the Puritans. It wasn't the Puritans. It was the
Mm,
beginning of Christianity.
Yeah.
right.
And it's not just Christianity that has this theme in it. Uh, there are other religions
Sure.
that have this theme, and that is that the way of the flesh is bad. The flesh encompasses not just like sexual things, but just everything about the body
Mhm.
is inferior to the spirit. And so when you um, satisfy your body in however whatever way it is, by eating too much or, playing
Having sex or
basketball or
whatever. Yeah.
whatever,
Mm.
you are not getting closer to God.
Right. There's like a level. There's like
Yes. And
levels and God's up here and the body's here and the mind
yeah,
is
and so
here.
there's Paul was who basically began Christianity. It was really Paul who kind of codified it, I guess, St. Paul. He was the one who said, don't worry, don't marry, be celibate, that's better. Uh, Christ is returning soon, yada, yada, yada. And it's more
Mm.
than just Christianity. I think this
I mean, the
exists
Jews, I mean, I'm
in all
always,
sorts of Eastern religions as well. So it's a very
yeah,
common thread.
yeah. And I think I mean, I'm always spouting about Jewish wisdom, but Jews also started hatred of the body.
Oh, did
Mm.
they? Yeah.
But not started because, of course, it was present in Hinduism
Yes.
and Jainism,
Yeah.
or although Jainism was later, but to my understanding, maybe I'm wrong.
But it's so
But
interesting.
sorry.
No, I'm just going to say that the Greek gods loved the body. They were all about the body. They were
Dionysus,
really
are you
into
kidding?
their body. Zeus was fathering all sorts of people with all sorts of other types of people.
And they were coming out of his head. He was actually like a,
Yeah,
a
yeah, but
woman with a.
somehow that became passé,
Mhm.
and then gods became spiritual, not of the body. I don't know.
But then the
What?
whole thing about
What?
Christianity is Jesus is supposed to like be God according to Christians, right? Or at least Catholics, right? Jesus is supposed to be God, I think Christians in general,
All Christians
in
in
human
general,
flesh, right?
right?
So it's like re-sanctifying of the flesh. But then
Yeah,
like the chances sort of miss because there's all this carryover.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Anyway, it just feels like there's this tension just goes on for thousands of
I
years.
think
But it
Amir wants to step in here now.
yeah.
Oh, yeah, I mean, well, one, it's a very masculine energy when it comes to the renunciation of the flesh.
Yeah.
Um, it's uh,
How do you
it's
mean that it's masculine? I mean, I'm intrigued, but I'm not sure I know
well,
how you
yeah,
mean that.
yeah. So you obviously have like the energetic polarity, and then you have genders, which is the whole thing, and then sex, which is more of a concrete manifestation of it, right? But when I mean masculine, I mean the energy. So feminine energy is more receptive, it's more unifying, it's a little bit less defined when I think of masculine and philosophically speaking, masculine is more of structures and borders and order and things aren't aligned and cleaning things and purifying things, making things neat. It's a very masculine energy. Feminine is nature. Tree can grow like that. I don't know if this is a fact, but there's kind of the thing. There's no right angles in nature. Everything's smooth and rounded. The earth is round, planets are round. Energy, there's, you know, container like water, containers of water, things where things are starting to blend
Nice.
and there's less
Yeah.
defined. It's the consuming, right? The ego itself is kind of a masculine entity in that it is I am here in my seat and you guys are over there and we are separate. I'm me and you are you and we are different. And that maintains our sense of I. But then the feminine concept of unity and love starts to dissolve that. And so there can be this resistance, especially ironically enough, right? The more powerful the ego, the more it wants to sustain itself and the more power it has to sustain itself. And so it's going to resist any form of dissolution with other people. And I don't know why I mean, it could have just be because back then it's like, people had rocks and stones. It's like whoever has the strength is just gonna call the shots. And so it's just a very simplistic barbarian kind of way of thinking. But this fear of the void, the darkness of conscious mind. I mean, even, sometimes you'll mention, ayahuasca, mother ayahuasca or psilocybin psychedelics and people freak out. And really what it is the fear of like, well, what happens if I lose my mind? I dissolve into the ether and I never come back. It's like this.
If I lose my ego, you're saying.
That's really what it is. Yeah. And
Yeah.
100%. And people have, I mean, it's not a unfounded fear. I mean, people have lost their mind. So I'm not even about to be like, oh, when they're being silly for that. It's a real fear, but it's that egoic idea of like, well, I need to like be here and in control and sober, clear mind. But then they use alcohol, all that in a conventional, okay way, right? They do drugs and other things, substances, and they dissolve it that way. I mean, I don't really drink anymore, but I remember I went to a club with my friends a year ago. I think it was a year and a half ago, and I was sober. And I could see, and this was after I'd done psilocybin and worked with people who were actually working with their inner childs in real time, and I could just see everyone trying to live out their child energy through the alcohol. And I realized that's what clubs were. I felt like I was in I don't know, I would say playground, but like a playhouse. I don't know if you guys remember if you're a kid and you would go to like McDonald's or Chuck E. Cheese. It felt like an adult version of that. Like the colors were all wacky and everything. I was like, oh my God, this is clubs and bars are just like ways that people are trying to live out their inner child joy, but
I
in a
love that.
different way
Clubs are like McDonald's play zones
for
20 years
adults.
later.
Yeah, but there's alcohol. Yeah, and it's people rubbing on each other and trying to like, and even the sexuality when alcohol is involved, like it's so um unrefined and goofy and like it's just hilarious because people don't want to actually be in the moment with these feelings, so they're like, let me just numb it first and then be like, oh, I was drunk and that was so crazy, blah blah blah. Totally fell victim to that myself, so I totally get it. No judgment, but um we're
But are you
resisting.
saying, oh, sorry.
No, I was gonna. Last point I was gonna make is that we resist it so much, but then you can see that there's a part of us that yearns for it, and it comes in through all of the love songs, all of the media, and
Yeah.
all of the alcohol.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So when you said the thing about the masculine energy with the constriction about body that we're talking about culturally, are
Mm.
you saying are you saying that what keeps coming into my mind, and I don't know if you're saying this or if it's coming into my mind, that religions basically developed to treat the masculine, to help the masculine attention towards division, etc., to bring in the feminine? In other words, our religion's essentially for men.
So interesting.
That's a really interesting question. I've never heard it posed.
It just came to me. I thought that's what you were sort of saying, but that I
Yeah.
couldn't tell.
I would say that it's for the masculine because the ego inherently. So I'm gonna go deeper. We're starting to get into some potentially controversial territory, but I'll send it and we'll see where we end up. Because the ego itself, from what I've read and what I believe and experienced myself, is inherently masculine. Like I did ayahuasca, full disclosure. Mother ayahuasca, she dissolves it, right? And I've always been somebody who has been relatively feminine for being a man. And so I've always kind of had questions about like what does it mean to be a masculine man and had trouble with that. And there's definitely been insecurity in the past because we live in a society where men are men and women are women, and it's starting to dissolve a little bit. And now we're trying to kind of separate it back up as policies, right? Point being is that when I did ayahuasca, I realized how comfortable I was in that space, and other people, especially the men, women were for the most part like able to just handle the suffering and the discomfort so much better than the men, and because the men are just like this, like so tight and resistant because they didn't want to dissolve into it. It's kind of like this fear of the, as Carl would probably say, like the Ouroboros or like the mother, the great engulfing.
Fear they'll get sucked back into the womb.
Yeah, and so it's not just the reason why it comes off like it's for men is because we have, on average, right? The man is going to have a stronger, more solidified ego. They're going to be less likely to be willing to hug their friends, to like relax, to be sensual. Not always. We have people like Prince, right? There's people that are very much in that energy. We're just talking about averages. And so, but even women have it, and women have it too. And I'm seeing it manifest in some of the ways where there be a push for like, well, we need people in positions of power and women need to have this and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I understand that sentiment and I don't wholly disagree, but we got to be careful of like realizing that the solution isn't to get a female Donald Trump or like to get a female Elon Musk. The solution is to see through the illusion of that position and see the inherent insanity of that. The fact that we have someone that can make $1 trillion and people are starving. Like,
Amen. Amen.
it's not, we don't want, so, and that's the masculine part. We all have a feminine part. We all have a masculine part. And so the ego is inherently masculine, and it's in women too. And so it's kind of like religion is for that masculine part of everybody. And it's essentially trying to like assuage and be like, it's okay. You can do certain things to like prep you to go back into the womb of the infinite.
Yeah.
Something like that.
So going back to the is religion for men question. So what I think you can parse, and a lot of our ancient myths, like the Gilgamesh,
Mhm.
depict this, is that the transition from hunter-gatherer society to more settled agricultural society necessitated sort of the taming of stereotypical masculine energy. That's what that whole Gilgamesh thing is about. It's a metaphor for the battle of the hunter-gatherers against the agriculture. And so what I wonder is whether or not religion, I mean, we've always been spiritual, I believe, human beings.
For sure.
Hunter-gatherers, whatever, doesn't matter. But did the kind of organized religious impulse co-develop with settled agricultural society? And if so, why? So, I'm not sure we need to pursue this any further than that, but I was just pondering your question and kind of trying to, flesh it out a little bit.
It reminds me of Ian McGilchrist, what you just said.
Ian McGilchrist, I know the name, but I can't.
Master and His Emissary. So he
Oh, that's
writes,
right.
yeah, he writes about left brain, right brain, masculine, feminine, and
I read the whole book.
Advent. Yeah.
I read the whole book. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
wonderful book. Yeah, actually, I was about to read it again, actually. Yeah, exactly. We have the left brain structure and or structure aspect of the psyche, and I don't know. It's think it may be because it's more piercing. It's able to. There's like a dance that happens. I feel like what happens is like you have like the right brain leads for a little bit, the feminine, because I think we had more paganistic societies, and there was a little bit more of like the different gods, and it was a little bit more fluid and nature and everything, and nature forward, I guess, right? And then you have the more masculine energy kind of taking over and be like, no, this is the way it is. And then I think what happens, which we're kind of getting to, see how long it takes. There's always a break. So, right, you even just think about like stress or tightness, rigidity. You tight, 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 and break. That's how people lose their minds on psychedelics, is because their psyche and their ego is so hard
Mhm.
and rigid, it's fragile, and it just takes a little bit of just shatters into a million pieces because
Right.
they're not malleable, they're not fluid enough, and that's what I'm seeing happen on a global scale right now, especially here for many reasons.
Even without psychedelics, you're saying.
What?
You're saying that breaking is happening
These
even without.
psychotic breaks are occurring, yeah, independent of
Oh,
psychedelics or narcotics. Or I think it's
yeah, well, that also, I mean, just even society itself. I mean, every society, it gets more rigid and it gets more structured, and then eventually it topples down. And
uh-huh.
the reason why I think my theory, totally unfounded by any study or anything, my philosophical theory, is that it is because of the rigidity. But there's this unconscious desire to return back.
Mhm.
There's and I would even argue that certain people have been put in place by the collective unconscious, my belief, it's my philosophical belief, to return us back, almost kind of like a flu or like a sickness to
You
repair.
had a term for something like that in the Jewish tradition, that
Tikkun
there's a,
olam.
huh?
Oh, the healing of the world, tikkun olam.
The kind of
Mm.
person that exists to kind of
Oh, you mean like
remember?
a lamed vavnik.
What is that?
That's Tikkun olam is the healing of the world, the raising up of the
Uh-huh.
sparks that exist in each of us that were
Mm.
shattered with the creation of the world. But lamed vavnik, lamed vav is the number 36 in Hebrew. A lamed vavnik is one of the 36. So
Mm.
the idea is that there are 36 people among humans.
Mm.
Probably the number is not that important, but anyway, um, who who are just the universe just puts them there to be like, all right, you got to get things back in balance. It's sort of like a lever that the universe can pull at any time to say, all right, there's a little too much here. Let's get it going. Yeah.
And in a recent Panda, we were talking about the concept of the trickster.
Mm.
The trickster, that person, the court jester, the prankster, the person who doesn't take things seriously, has a serious role to play in society,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, yes. I mean, very much so. It's that mirror. I think there's a reason why comedy is becoming. I mean, you have
Yes,
comedians becoming like almost A-list, almost Joe Rogan, A-list celebrities. It's becoming its own thing.
right.
Again, it's just a natural flow of the collective unconscious and how it's flowing and moving. It's fascinating to watch. Um, and yeah, I think people are caught up in like who's president and who's in power in different countries and what's happening, but not realize. For me, in my opinion, I think that there is a maybe a greater order happening or a greater happening, and that to me it feels like we're reaching again. Who knows how long it takes? A point where something's gonna break because if you don't listen to the signs, right? Example would be you're eating a bunch of junk food and you go to the doctor, or you get some chest pain, you go to the doctor, and he's like, hey, probably, she's like, hey, stop.
Nice catch.
Yeah, right? They're like, hey, stop, right? And you go back and you keep doing it. You don't listen, and then eventually you have a heart attack. And it feels like that's what's happening.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, I mean, if we go back to the world of politics, both the left and the right are convinced that it's happening to the other side. Like
Yes,
they're the ones who are breaking, but we're fine. And it's like
exactly. Exactly.
the great sort of insight is like everyone's broken. We're all breaking.
Well,
So,
well, and it will also even, and it's for our own good because we're not listening. We
Yeah.
know
Well, and
that.
it turns us into a place of humility. Like eventually when you hit bottom, humility happens to you because you can't be arrogant at that point. Like it defies your capacity to function, to be arrogant. So you just move into humility. That's where we're
Well,
headed.
Right.
I didn't want us to lose the opportunity to ask Amir about his alchemy project.
Yes.
You know, where you actually, as you started off saying, are trying to take elements of the occult. This is how I heard you,
Mhm.
and kind of join them, incorporate them, collaborate with. I don't know what that other part is, but obviously with non-occult things, like maybe psychology or whatever. So I would love you to say a little bit more about that. And then if you have an example that
Sure.
kind of makes that more concrete, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm still developing the process, but what I have been working with and what I find very fascinating is parts work when it comes to, let's say, trauma-informed care or more
You're
of
going to
like,
have to explain parts work.
Mhm.
sure, yeah, internal family systems, essentially surrounded by the concept that every individual, it's not one individual, but a collective of different subpersonalities, subparts. At first, it might sound kind of weird, but then you could think of the simple example of the person that is watching this video right now is not the same person that is at work, which is not the same person with the partner, or with friends, or with your parents, etc. That still feels a little iffy. Inner child is a part. And I think most people would agree that there is some form of an inner child, past memories, parts of a different person or energies inside of a person, right? This very much aligns with shamans and what they've been doing for thousands of years. This is not new. This is something we've forgotten and is now coming back into the zeitgeist. Similar to meditation, how yogis have been doing it for thousands of years. And then in the last 100 years, science is saying, hey, do you guys know that meditation is good for you? And yogis are like, yeah, we've been doing it for thousands of years. We never stopped. They're like, oh, well, also, we've heard that like yoga is really good for you too. Like, oh, no way, tell us more. And yoga isn't good for you in the sense of like, oh, relax the body. The difference in improvement in mental health is not determined. Like, it's like, okay, we don't know why it's doing these certain poses in this formation is better than just stretching normally like an athlete. Like, so these are things that are ancient knowledge and deemed as a cult that now science is kind of bringing in. But going back to the parts work, it is a shamanic idea of you have these different parts of your soul. You can say psyche, you can say angels, demons, doesn't matter to me. I think it's all the same thing. And you work with these different parts of yourself. And I've working with shamans, not like any formal training or anything, but just sitting with the medicine, but then also talking with them and seeing how they do things. Learning how to use the breath to go in and interact with these parts of oneself and learning how to kind of come in with a diplomatic approach. And specifically, what I'm trying to center around is habits. So I extend this philosophy, this idea to when someone's addicted, say someone's addicted is kind of a heavy word right now. Let's just say, overly attached to something. So, okay, I watch too much TV. Keep it very simple. Well, you don't watch TV 100% of the time. Nobody does. So that means that in my mind, there's a part of you that is very heavily or overly attached to TV. You go in and you talk to that version, that part of yourself, and learn why are you attached? What are you supplementing TV for? And so you do it piece by piece, not looking at the whole organism like you're an addict or you have this problem, but more so interacting with that specific being that's inside. And so that's really fascinating to me. Um, and where it gets more occult is then there's like there could be a karmic energy or karmic side to it, meaning that we are meant to learn certain lessons, karmic lessons, because it's part of our evolution as spiritual beings on this plane. And then this is just one individualistic incarnation. And when you learn what this incarnation's main lesson is, it makes life a lot easier, in my opinion. Because then you can accept the good and the bad because you just realize it as a particular journey and story that you're supposed to go on. So,
Do you have a sense of your karmic lesson, and can you share if you do?
yeah, sure. I mean, when I was super fascinated with past lives, but I could never access it. I'm not a very visual person. Even when I did, psychedelics, I would see fun visuals. I've had friends that go to like the center of the galaxy or go crazy places, and I'm always here. They'll see things, they'll go through portals. So I was like, I mean, I wonder what I did in a past life to experience depression and to experience the negative stuff, right? Because you want to find meaning in the suffering. So I asked myself when I was doing ayahuasca, what did I do in a past life that made me I am today and why I'm on this journey? And I learned that I was a warmonger. So villages pillaging and killing. I was like the one of the chief's people type thing. Whether it's real, I don't know. But what I learned was that you've caused a lot of suffering. It is now your turn to alleviate a lot of suffering. And I kind of developed this understanding of how, if you believe in past lives, as I do, that we each play a character in the play of life. So sometimes you play the good guy, sometimes you play the bad guy. Doesn't mean you deserve to play the good guy after you play the bad guy or vice versa. There's no deserving, there's no like fault. It's just is. Kind of like how when you watch a play or you watch a movie, you don't get mad at Heath Ledger for playing the Joker or Leonardo DiCaprio for playing a, douchebag who loves a bunch of money, right? You just realize the art and the fact that he's playing out that role and you appreciate him for playing that role because it was needed to live out that story, and then you move on and you play another character in the next film or whatever it is. And so each film could be thought of as an incarnation.
That's very similar to some Christians' explanation for the character of Judas in the Gospels, that obviously none of what Christ was intended to do could have occurred if Judas had not played his role.
That's right.
And
the
so,
Jews talk about how Eve
very similar, very similar.
Eve had to eat of the fruit of forbidden
Right.
knowledge, it's the forbidden fruit, because otherwise we don't get kicked out of the garden and humanity never,
And you could think of it like a game, 100%. It allows you to play the game, kind of like, and the idea in my mind is to realize the game you're playing. Some people are playing Monopoly. Some people are playing Uno. Some people are playing cards. But when you look at somebody playing Monopoly and you want to play Monopoly, but you're actually playing Uno and you're trying to play by those rules, you're going to have a bad time. Right? Someone's like, what are you doing? They're like, oh, I'm rolling the dice. Like, there's no dice. We're playing Uno. What are you talking about? And then people freak out. It's similar to the analogy that maybe it was Einstein, but it's if you judge a fish by how well he can climb a tree, then, or he's going to feel like an idiot or something like that, right? It's just like if you're judging people based off of the metrics of somebody else's story,
right,
you're going to have a bad time.
I'm just going to attribute that to you. I don't think Einstein said that, but
oh, really?
I love that. If you judge a fish by how well he climbs up a tree, he's going to feel like an idiot.
Yeah, I mean, and that's another problem with schools. We have this metric of like IQ, and this is the measure of intelligence. We want to make things like very stable and concrete, and for me, I just feel like, yeah, it's just I think we're just a bunch of characters playing a bunch of characters. I don't know. Like, it feels like it's a game that we're just playing and we're all just kind of figuring our stuff out and trying to figure out what game we're playing, and then you play your game and then you can move on to the next one. And how does it work? I don't know. Right? I don't know. The ego doesn't. I mean, I'm not Amir 2 in the next incarnation, it just is. But I think the thing that really does give me solace is not even the past life of like, oh, this bad thing happened because you did this bad thing, but more so the idea of I have the capacity to play a bad guy. I have the past to play a good person. Everybody has that capacity.
Yeah.
And it's not, just thinking that, oh, no, they're inherently a bad, like that is just a bad individual and I'm a good individual, period.
Yeah.
Because I worked with past lives and people have learned some bad things about some of the stuff they've done. Everyone wants to assume that they were a good person. Again, if you believe in it, right? they think, oh, I'm a good person in this incarnation, so therefore I would have had to have been a good person in my past life because I'm a good person forever. It's like, oh, I don't know if
Well,
that's
so that's like parts work across time.
exactly.
Yeah.
Because I would even argue that there are parts that we get from past lives. Just
Right.
like how I would also theorize that you would get parts from ancestors.
I would totally believe that you could go be a warmonger in a village at some point. Yeah. You look at, yeah, it seems possible.
I mean, who knows? I saw it. I was pretty clear. I was like, I can see it, and then I incarnate into the family that I have, and we weren't warmongers, but definitely some anger issues going through, whatever, definitely um, some aggressive energy, Polish and Lebanese energy right there. So we're not just chill. I had a very intense family. Um, and it just makes sense, And so that's how my mind is able to rationalize it. And when I've worked with people, it leads to positive changes. So
Cool.
yeah, there's a lot, and I'm still refining it, but that's the kind of general gist of you're working with the different parts of yourself, transforming them to transform you as a whole being, and kind of seeing the bigger picture.
Since you're working toward your MSW degree, I was curious, there's this thing fad now for life coaches,
Mm,
and it's unregulated. I don't know if any state has begun to regulate it, but almost anybody can hang up a shingle with almost any kind of a degree or not even a degree
mm,
and say they're a life coach and charge a lot of money. And in fact, I was listening to a podcast by a woman who is in fact a PhD psychologist
mm.
and but also has a sort of a separate business as a life coach. And she says, I make a lot more money as a life coach
Yeah.
Definitely.
than I make as a family, whatever her specialty is, sort of marriage and family. Um, because I don't know why, but they're willing to pay more and it's unregulated. So you have any thoughts about that?
I mean, I do coaching now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think it can be a dangerous game. Not for her. I'm not worried about her. You do have people. Um, I mean, unregulated is dangerous. I think but at the same time, I trust people. I don't. There are certain. I believe that when it comes to regulations, we should be protecting, in my opinion, protecting the masses from the people at the top, the corporations and the people with all the money, and less protecting them from themselves. In the sense of what I think is cool about coaching in general, and the way I think it should work in a healthy way, is that somebody's like, I was overweight, I lost a bunch of weight, this is how I did it. If you have the same story or have the same problem and you want to learn how I did it, I can help you with that. And I think that's really powerful. And I think that's something that can be missed when people kind of just go to school to get degrees and they might be treating people or working people that have no
Right.
idea what
Right.
it's like to be that.
Yeah,
Yeah, I wonder
that's
about
more
it.
pathologizing.
When you go to a doctor and you go like, well, have you ever experienced something like this? Do you even really know what I'm talking about?
Right.
Exactly. And a lot of times the answer is no,
No,
right? It's a lot of
exactly.
outside looking in. And so
Yeah.
I do believe that it's up to obviously, I don't believe in lying. So if you don't be like, I'm a doctor or I have this credential and I don't, that's obviously not okay. But if the whole idea is I'm a coach and I'm helping people feel more confident because I had social anxiety and this is what I did and you pay me money to teach you what I did, fair enough. And sometimes I think that can be more powerful than somebody who just like, well, did you ever have social anxiety? They're like, no. But you sat in a class and learned about it. Okay, that's cool. And maybe you worked with some people. But
Exactly.
again, it's out, but you're still on outside looking in, just like how I could never be like coaching pregnant woman. Like, I don't know. I don't know what it's like. That's just my take. I mean, some people are like, that's sexist. I don't know. Maybe. I mean, it's just for me, I think it's like there's something there's something special about having a problem, solving it, and then turning around and being like, anyone else has the same problem, I can help you out. Because or at least I can show you how I did it and hopefully it helps you out because everyone's different. And so I liked that about coaching. It seems it's a little bit more it can be more genuine, as long as people aren't lying
It's
about what,
kind of more grassroots too.
yeah.
And I love that you're getting yourself the capacity because I did life coaching for at some point in my life. And I was, raised by two therapists and
Mm.
um I thought I just based on them I could just do it. And what I was missing, I realized after I had some difficult clients, is the capacity to deal with the difficult clients who actually want therapy, but they're paying you to coach them because they don't want to say they go to a therapist. And then to realize that, I think that's the key thing. And you're getting yourself the skills that it takes to figure out like the difference between therapy and coaching.
Well, you're actually also exactly right in that I'm working with people and I do want to go towards that area, but I'm not, yeah, I don't know. Like, I can give philosophical stuff. I can speak about things that I've experienced and things I've read, but that's what I mean by blending in the more evidence based. Like, yeah, I want to go and work with people on a deeper level, but I'm not about to just venture in
Yeah,
blind, right? Right.
right.
So, it's not fun for me or them. But there is this block, and I kind of hit a wall, and I'm like, oh, I don't like this. I want to get on the other side of that. So that is kind of the idea. Yeah, will I become a licensed therapist? Probably, but also I'm kind of unpredictable, to be honest. So I'm happy to just get the degree, learn what I need to learn, and then might do coaching. But I wouldn't call myself a therapist, but I would be able to help people in a therapeutic way better because I know what I'm doing
Yeah.
more clearly.
Yep.
Um, I think that there needs to be change in the mental health space. So that's my main philosophy with it. And I could also see myself becoming a licensed therapist and seeing certain limitations or seeing certain things that I can't do, and then just me being like, well, I'm gonna do what I want to do, but obviously not as a licensed therapist. So, um,
Right.
but I just know that it just feels like that's the direction I need to go in. Is I need to go back to school. I didn't want to. I love learning on my own. I love just like absorbing information and reading books like Master and Emissary, and it didn't start with you and things like that. These amazing books, but the universe has told me through you can just sometimes you just know and you're like, ah, God, I've been trying to avoid doing the thing I know I'm supposed to do that I
I
have to do.
feel you. I feel you.
That's life, dude. But yeah,
You got your marching orders, and who are you to like reject them?
yeah, and it for me there was like, that couple months where I'm like, God, I was traveling the world and now I have to like slow down and go back. But at the same time, it's kind of like it's just part of the story. And there's really, I mean, I've been not like crazy actually homeless, but I didn't have a place to stay for like 10 days while living in LA and figuring out being a musician and stuff. So during that time period, I was like, this is the worst. And then I look back and me and my friend tell people about it and we laugh. And so I know that I've become aware of how things work in my life, which is I have these ups, then I have the downs, and I know there's another up, and I'm just able to be like, okay, this is one of these down moments where I'm like, oh, I remember when I had to go back to school and it was winter and it was cold and I don't like it, but
Right.
Not just your life, everyone's life. There's no exception to that rule.
for sure, yeah, that's true. I will admit, I think some people's lives are a little more chaotic, but
Well,
obviously
right, but there are always these ups and downs. But
I call them, yeah, peaks and valleys,
so
100%.
if we're gonna have to close soon, but I just want to ask if we add one of your songs from Amir the Alchemist, the musical artist,
Mm,
to our
Mm.
playlist, which one would you have us add?
close.
The song Close?
It's close. Yeah, that's my favorite
It's
one.
in there. All right, I'll put it
Cheers. Thank you. Thank you for
in.
having me. I
Yeah, thanks
appreciate
for
it.
being here.
Of course.
No, it's great talking to you. I
Yeah.
yeah, enjoy. I mean, I enjoy listening to anyone who is discovering.
Oh, dude, I am very much Christopher Columbus right now.
Yeah, there you
Sailing out.
go. There you
Yeah,
go.
yeah, yeah. It's fun. It really is fun to kind of explore and um try to expand a little bit, see what we can find because we don't know what we don't know.
Right.
And we try to pretend like we know everything. Um, and then we learn that we know nothing. So that's life.
Amen.
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 Thank
Cheers.
you.
Of course. Thank you guys.